After studying this module, you'll be able to understand investors' uncertainty over dividends, Gordon's model on bird in hand argument, informational content of dividends signaling hypothesis, Littner's model of corporate dividend behavior. Let us begin our discussion with dividend and uncertainty. The argument of uncertainty of dividend is favored by various schools of thought. The reason is that the investor prefer cash dividends in current time rather than in future. The investor preferring current dividend plays lower required rate of return and thus value of the stock is high. In this regard, John Emmett Krishnan made the following concise statement. Of two stocks with identical earnings, records and prospects, but the one paying a larger dividend than the other, the former will undoubtedly command a higher price merely because stockholders prefer present to future values. Myopic vision plays a part in the price making process. Stakeholders often act upon the principle that a bird in hand is worth two in the bush and for this reason are willing to pay a premium for the stock with the higher dividend rate just as the discount the one with the lower rate. Myron Gordon had earlier given this view that dividend is irrelevant, that is, it has no impact on the value of the share when internal rate of return R is equal to the cost of capital K. He later modified his assumption and came to a conclusion that dividend policy affects the value of the share where R equal to K. This argument is known as bird in hand argument. The logic behind this argument is that the investor discount the distant dividends at higher required rate of return than the near dividends. According to him, uncertainty increases as when time progresses. Therefore, the required rate of return cannot be assumed to remain constant. Hence, the investors are reluctant to take risk of future uncertainty, prefer current dividends and thus are willing to pay higher price for such stocks. The Gordon model can be expressed in equation as follows. P naught equal to dividend 1 upon 1 plus K1 plus dividend 2 divided by 1 plus K2 plus dividend 3 divided by 1 plus K3 and so on up to dividend n divided by 1 plus Kn. This gives us the summation of dividend V. This gives us the summation of dividend T divided by 1 plus Kt, where P naught is equal to price of the share where retention rate B equal to 0. K is equal to the cost of capital K1 which is greater than Kt minus 1. If the firm retains a part B of its earnings, then dividend per share is equal to 1 minus B into EPS 1 in the first year. That is the earnings per share in the first year. Therefore, the growth rate of dividends is G equal to BR when retained earnings are reinvested at the rate of return R. We will get the following equation after incorporating growth in dividends. PB equal to dividend 0 into 1 plus G to the power 1 divided by 1 plus K1 plus dividend 0 into 1 plus G square divided by 1 plus K2 square up to dividend 0 into 1 plus G to the power n divided by 1 plus Kn to the power n, where PB is price of share when B greater than 0. If we discount the dividend stream at a uniform rate K, which is the weighted average of Kt, the value of PB will be PB equal to dividend 0 into 1 plus G divided by 1 plus K plus dividend 0 1 plus G divided by 1 plus K. Here the K is something which we have changed to K bar plus dividend 0 1 plus G to the power n divided by 1 plus K to the power n. Here K bar minus GK bar equal to BR. Through the above derivation of this equation, Gordon concluded that the increase in the retention of earnings will result in lowering the value of the share. His conclusion is based on the assumption that the investors are risk averse and they consider distant dividends less certain than the near dividends. Let us now understand the informational content of dividends and signaling hypothesis. During the times of uncertainty, the investors look for information content of dividends and signaling by the firms. The information content of dividend hypothesis is a firm-specific hypothesis which contends that managers of a firm use the dividend to signal asymmetric information about the firm's future earnings. According to the dividend signaling hypothesis, dividend change announcement trigger share return because they convey information about management's assessment on firm's future prospects. Information communicated by dividends about the future prospects of a company can be inferred as information content of the dividends. By way of announcing the dividend action, the company signal the investors. Usually in the stock market, we see that an increase in stock price happened due to an increase in dividend, whereas a decline in dividend leads to a fall in stock price. The perception of a public shareholder is that a sudden upsurge in dividend is due to improvement of earnings of the firm in future and vice versa. This can be explained with an example. XYZ Limited has been paying a stable dividend of Rs 3 per year with earnings per share at Rs 5. Suppose the current EPS rises from 5 to 8 and the company does not increase the dividend. Then the shareholders may perceive this event as a temporary occurrence. In case the dividends are increased to Rs 4 per share, then it may give a signal to the shareholder that the company's earnings are likely to increase in the longer term. This thought process may instill confidence in the shareholders, which may lead to an increase in the share price of the firm. But we should understand that the market value has not raised on account of change in dividend, but the information of change of dividends carry. Public shareholders feel that the direction and managers of companies have better knowledge about companies' prospects. Therefore, shareholders try to gather the scraps of information available from insiders to make sense of it. This is attributed to information asymmetry in the capital markets. Rather than announcing about the expected improvements in future, the managers announce increase in dividend to convince the shareholders about the same time. But the managers have to be cautious too when it comes to signaling the information content of dividends. For example, if firm's long-term financing prospects are bright, but it is also planning capital expenditure in near future, therefore, the need of R may be to cut the dividends, which may send a negative signal in the market by reducing the stock price. The shareholder may think that the company's earnings are likely to fall, which is actually false. Hence, the manager should consider the signaling effect while formulating a dividend policy. We shall now look at the Littners model of corporate dividend behavior. The pattern of dividends followed by firm has always been an intriguing topic of research. Various research studies are there on the dividend behavior of firms. One of the earliest works on this area has been done by John Littner in 1956. Littner did his study with the firms of US to study the pattern of dividends. The findings of his study are as follows. Firms set long-term target payout ratios. Managers are concerned about the change in the dividend rather than the absolute level. Managers don't consider investment requirement before amending the pattern of dividend payment behavior. Dividend payment depend on earnings. Dividends follow a smoother path than earnings. Dividends are sticky in nature as managers are reluctant to effect dividend change that may be reversed. Now we shall understand the Littners model in detail. Let us suppose that a firm has been stringently following a stable payout policy. Assumingly, its expected earnings per share in the year 1 are EPS 1 and P as the target payout ratio. Its expected dividend per share, dividend 1 will be dividend 1 equal to price into EPS, that is earnings per share in the first year. The dividend change from the previous year will be as follows. Dividend in the first year minus dividend in the previous year is equal to price into EPS of that particular year minus the dividend of the previous year. In reality, the firms don't change dividend per share immediately with the change in earnings per share. The dividend change is done slowly and gradually, even if the earnings have risen tremendously. In other words, firms manage their dividend payments so as to produce a smooth progression in the dividends. The firms adjust the level of speeds with which they progress towards full adjustment of payment to earnings. Let us assume the speed of adjustment is B. Littner gave the following formula to incorporate the speed factor of adjustment, which is dividend in the year minus dividend in the previous year equal to B into P into EPS of the first year minus dividend of the previous year. That is, dividend of this year minus dividend of previous year is equal to B into P into EPS of this year minus B into dividend of the previous year, where B is the speed of adjustment and P is the target payout ratio. The equation implies that firms set their dividends as per the levels of current earnings. The current dividends not only depend on the current earnings but dividends of past year also. Littner also expressed the generalized form of his model as given below. Dividend in an year minus dividend in the previous year is equal to B into P into EPS of the same year minus B into dividend of the previous year. This can also be written as dividend of this year equal to B into P into EPS of this year plus 1 minus B into dividend of the previous year, where P is the target payout ratio and B is the adjustment factor. Here we should understand that the adjustment factor B will be large in case of aggressive firms, where small for conservative firms. We will understand the Littners model with the example. XYZ Limited has earnings per share of Rs 5 for the year T. Its dividend per share for the year T minus 1 was Rs 2. Assume the target payout ratio and the adjustment rate for this firm are 0.6 and 0.5 respectively. What would be the dividend per share for XYZ Limited for the year T using Littners model? The DPS for year T is given by dividend of this year equal to B into P into EPS of this year plus 1 minus B into dividend of the previous year, which is 0.5 into 0.6 into 5 plus 1 minus 0.5 into 2 is equal to 2.5. Thus, dividend for the current year is Rs 2.5, which is partly dependent on previous year's dividend and partly on the current earnings. Let us summarize our discussion so far. Dividend payments resolve uncertainty due to various reasons. Gordon proposed that investors perceive uncertainty towards distant dividends and attach higher risk to it. In times of uncertainty, investors look for informational content of dividends and signaling by the management. Information content of dividends means that managers signal about future prospects through dividend announcements. Littner gave a model of predicting dividends in future. In his study, he surveyed US firms and he found that the current dividend depends on past year's dividends and current year's earnings.